Let's talk about the worst team in the Western Conference and technically the second worst team in the NBA right now, the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans just got Herb Jones back after missing 18 games and Brandon Ingram after missing 5, just for Brandon Ingram to get assassinated by Lou Dort towards the end of this game, and you can't convince me that that foul wasn't at least partially on purpose. God, this chair is going to be the death of me. I can't be convinced that Lou Dort didn't do that on purpose. I'm going to splice in a clip. Y'all can be the judge, but for me, Lou Dort has a history of this, and in taking into consideration the history of how he is as a basketball player, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he might have flopped under Brandon Ingram's ankles here, but maybe that's just me. Zion is also at minimum missing another 2 weeks. Jordan Hawkins is in a similar situation. Jose Alvarado is out for roughly another week as far as I can tell. But when this Pelicans team is healthy, Jose Alvarado probably isn't even getting any playing time anyway, or at least nothing consistent. So what's next for the Pelicans? Well, we can at least think about Brandon Ingram and the fact that he probably, emphasis on probably because we thought this in the offseason too, won't be on this team come the trade deadline. He's an expiring contract. He said he wants out. The Pelicans want to deal him since they didn't sign him to an extension. Now, I don't actually 100% know if Brandon Ingram himself has gone to the front office and said, I want out of here, but the situation is awkward at the very least. And obviously that drives down the price for him. Brandon Ingram, a guy that could probably get 2-3 first-round picks and a solid young player for Brandon Ingram at this point in his prime, 27 years old. Is this his final form? It's possible. I said that like he's a Pokemon. But as far as destinations go, is he getting traded to a contender? How does this affect the Pelicans? We'll get to in a second, but is he getting traded to a contender? Is he going to a team like, I think, the Hornets come trade deadline? When I say the Hornets, I mean a team of that caliber, a team that's in the rebuilding stage and could potentially be better, just looking to add pieces and buy low on certain players, especially these small market teams who can't really attract free agents as well as larger market teams like the Lakers, the Knicks. Obviously, everyone knows this. But take, for example, Pascal Siakam, who went to the Pacers, got traded from the Raptors. That's an example of a small team making a deal for a star player in the middle of the season. I don't really know where Brandon Ingram is going to go. I don't really know. It's kind of the same situation with Zach LaVine with the Bulls. It's like these rumors of being traded have been going on for so long that it feels like it's inevitable, but because it feels like it's inevitable, teams don't want to give up too much, and the Pelicans are asking for too much, and it's this weird middle ground where I don't know if he'll ever be traded, and with the new CBA, it's kind of difficult for teams to trade for a guy like that, especially in contenders, so I'm not 100% sure where he's going to end up. And if he gets dealt, is this the final version of Brandon Ingram like I was talking about? Can he develop that three ball a little bit more? Can he become a little bit more consistent of a scorer when it comes playoff time? He's obviously more of a second, third option on a contender. I think there's a situation in which Brandon Ingram could be a number 2 option on a contender, but it has to be the right team, and that third player has to be solid as well. And then as the Pelicans, what do you want for Brandon Ingram? What are you asking for? In my opinion, you should be asking for 2 picks and a solid young player at the very least. I don't know if teams are willing to give you that for a guy like B.I. And in the Pelicans case, you're looking for a solid young center or just a solid center in general as part of the deal, so you can start him over Yves Messi or Daniel Tice, 2 players in totally different situations, a veteran player that's on his way out of the league, and then with Yves Messi, it's the exact opposite, where he's a rookie that just doesn't look ready for those starting minutes yet. I could see him being a starting center eventually, but right now, definitely not. So in a deal for Brandon Ingram, ideally, you're getting a young center back and 2 picks. Ideally. I'm hyper-focused on the Hornets because I don't really know what other team is trading for Brandon Ingram. Every other contender, Mavs, Thunder, Knicks, Celtics, all have a roster that they feel super solid about or want to make some cap room situations move around, like maybe move a player here or a player there to save a little bit in the tax realm. But other than that, these teams feel pretty solidified, whether it's the Thunder going in fully on a large talent like if a Giannis or an Anthony Davis were to become available. I think OKC would throw the absolute barnyard of picks at them, but I don't see a situation in which they would trade for BI. Obviously, they've got J-Dub. Mavs, no. Celtics, no. I could sit here and riff things all day about Brandon Ingram, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's got a perfect deal lined up, and I think the Pelicans are going to have to sell low on him. But luckily, you have your Brandon Ingram replacement, or at least part of it, sitting on your bench right now in Trey Murphy III, who, while yes, would you like him to do a little more off the dribble and facilitate a little more? Absolutely, but that's why you bring in guys like CJ McCollum, and that's why you traded for DeJounte Murray this offseason. But anyway, that's enough BI trade talk, because I'm sure Pelicans fans are sick and tired of listening to that. Let's get to something a little more depressing. Zion and his injuries, and what could have been, or what should be, or what can be with Zion Williamson. I'm just going to kind of read this off here. NBA University recently treated a ranking of the 2019 draft class based on the total number of points scored. And where do you think Zion Williamson is on that list? Third, fourth, maybe even first, if somehow there's no other player in the 2019 draft class that puts up points like him? The answer is 8th in the 2019 draft class as far as total points go. A full 2,000 points behind the number 1 spot, which is held by his Duke teammate, RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett has scored 6,590 points across his young NBA career. Zion is at 4,678. Again, a full 2,000 points behind his Duke teammate. He's also behind Darius Garland, which makes sense. John Morant, which also makes sense, but he did miss pretty much all of last season. Then it's Jordan Poole, who had a great stint on the Warriors and does score a lot of points. Efficiently, not so much, but he does get those shots up. And then it's Keldon Johnson at 7, still above Zion, by the way. USA Basketball's own Keldon Johnson, a guy that averaged 17 points in leading the tank for Wembanyama 2 years ago. Doesn't really have that big of a role now, but is playing better basketball. And then it's Zion at 8th, who is slowly being caught up upon by PJ Washington, a guy that's not even the third option on the Mavericks on most nights. And also, PJ didn't really have that significant of a role on the Hornets. Yes, he scores 12, 14 points a season, but this is Zion Williamson we're talking about, the number 1 overall pick. It's sad because Zion, who's a guy who's had his concerns with his jump shot and injury issues that was seen all the way back in 2019 as the next NBA superstar, the LeBron comparisons, the full media package, everything. He had everything going for him. And I'm not sitting here and saying that Zion has no chance of being a generational talent. He absolutely does, but it just feels like every time we get to a moment in which Zion can break out into full superstardom, he gets injured. And I don't really know how to solve that as a franchise. You put all this time and effort and built a roster around a guy that just simply cannot stay on the court. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that this Pelicans team was holding the top seed in the Western Conference going into the year of our Lord 2023. With their loss tonight, the Pelicans become the first Western Conference team in 34 years to be the 1 seed in December and miss the playoffs. That was in April of 2023. Mind you, this is not the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th seed playing around with being a playoff team instead of being a play-in team. No, this is the number 1 seed. The Pelicans then were completely formidable and honestly scary. They had Valanciunas back then, so that's something to factor in. But at the same time, he played a big role for them, but he wasn't the same guy he was on the Grizzlies. It's depressing to even talk about this team, and I know as Pelicans fans, if you're watching this video, you don't need another reason or another person telling you how bad your team is, but you are 8 games out of the play-in right now. The Suns are currently 8 games in front of you at the 10 seed. And then at the 11th seed, it's the Timberwolves. So it's like those two teams are going to pick up steam and be in the play-in or the playoffs. So then you got to worry about the other teams that are in front of them, which are the Lakers. The Kings you got to worry about because they're the 12th seed, I think, right now. They've been an absolute dumpster fire, but you got to assume that they're going to at least be a play-in team. So here's the real question to ask. Is this the last we've seen of this Pelicans team, at least this specific version? I would say yes and no. Yes, that Brandon Ingram is not going to be on this team anymore, but no, because you just bought in on a guy like DeJounte Murray who had a complete freak injury in the first game of the season and has since come back, and he hasn't looked amazing, but he's looked solid. So you've bought in on this team and you have the Brandon Ingram replacement sitting on your bench. Trey Murphy, again, slots in well at that position, and though he has missed about half the season, he's played 12 games so far and he's averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists on 34% three-point shooting, which should increase as he gets his bearings again. He's a career 38% three-point shooter, so I don't see that disappearing overnight. And again, like I said, you wish he could be a better player off the dribble and a better facilitator. Yes, but again, that's why you bring in DeJounte Murray to handle the ball the whole time. It's incredibly important, as Pelicans fans will remind you, and people who do articles and talk about the Pelicans may forget that this team was a 1 seed 2 years ago. A 1 seed with essentially the same roster. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to completely write this team off immediately. Yes, they ended up missing the playoffs that year, but I think there's a situation in which this team can manage to be a great team even with these injuries. It just can't all happen at once. You can't have Brandon Ingram get murdered on live television by Lou Dort while Zion is watching and Herb Jones is back from his 18-game missing streak. So again, you're not completely stuck in the mud. Shit could get worse, and I hope it doesn't get worse. You trade Brandon Ingram for a young center. You get a couple of picks. You have your own pick this year. When you traded for DeJounte Murray, you traded the Lakers and your 2027 pick. So you still have your 2025 pick just in case. Hit on that pick, and you're exactly where you were in 2022, I think. I think this team has plenty of life left in it. I don't think you need to trade Zion yet. I don't think you need to fire sell on Herb Jones or Jose Alvarado, who could go play for a tanking team maybe. Yes, it looks horrific. And is this season a wash? Probably. I mean, you're a game back from the Utah Jazz, who are actively trying to capture the flag right now. It doesn't look great right now, and you're dealing with a lot of injuries. But I think when you get to late January, early February, and this team is clicking, and you finally get off Brandon Ingram and that whole awkward situation, I think this team will look pretty solid in the back half of the season. And then they'll probably tank for the last 20 games to make sure they get a top 4 pick, which you can't blame them. I mean, if they're already in that situation, why wouldn't you? But I think this team does have a push left in it. I think it wouldn't shock me if they're on like a 6-game winning streak at the end of January and you're like, oh, well, here come the Pelicans, and yet they're still too deep in a hole to dig themselves out of. So it's like, there's no real point in going on this winning streak, so they pull the plug. Look, you gave up Dyson Daniels in that deal. Would it be nice to have Dyson Daniels right now, especially in his current form? Absolutely. But he wasn't going to be that kind of player for you, and that's how you have to live with it. You can't keep thinking about it. So for the Pelicans, the next steps are very crucial because you still have the majority of your picks. You still have a lot of depth, though that depth is injured a lot. Jordan Hawkins is a guy you can definitely move, but I think he has Jordan Clarkson or Cam Thomas potential with scoring off the bench. So I don't know if I'd move a guy like that, but again, if you want to include him in a deal, you could. No one's really stopping you. I think if you want to trade Brandon Ingram for a solid center like a DeAndre Ayton trade, wow, I completely forgot to talk about this when I was talking about the trades. I think Brandon Ingram could go to the Blazers. Ayton for Brandon Ingram. Ayton offers some solutions to the Pelicans center problems, and Brandon Ingram is going to be off his contract at the end of the year, so you can just let him walk if he doesn't really fit your plans, which for the Blazers he doesn't really, and DeAndre Ayton doesn't fit your plans either. So Donovan Clingan, welcome to being a starting center. DeAndre Ayton ends up on the Pelicans, and who knows, maybe he becomes a better player there. That's all I really got. Pelicans fans, keep your heads up. One of my roommates is a Pelicans fan. He's just kind of stopped watching Pelicans games this season. I don't blame him. Anyway, y'all take care. Have a good one.